Story 1. I built a 13-foot Tyrannosaurus Rex with Christopher Walken's head. New York Magazine called it highbrow and brilliant. Story 2. My dad's name is Luigi and my uncle's name is Mario. They are brothers. I forgot to add that my dad is also a plumber. Story 3. I died first and then was born. I have told this story a few times on Reddit and I enjoy telling it, so here it is again. During the cesarean section to deliver me, my mother had a major complication. She began bleeding internally, which drowned me in the womb. When I was removed, the doctors tried to get me breathing but could not. I was declared dead. My mother was still unconscious, and my father was brought in to say goodbye. He held me and was saying goodbye when, out of nowhere, I started coughing up blood and screaming like babies do. Apparently, it was the strangest moment of his life. He was terrified and overwhelmed with joy that I was alive. It is my favorite story to tell because, strangely, it takes some of the pressure off birthdays. I do not do well with too much attention from family and friends, but celebrating my death day does not carry the same connotations. Story 4. I grew up on the wrong side of the river, was considered by everyone to be the town loser, and worked as a janitor while still in high school. In my 40s, while still working full-time, I set a goal to take one class at a time until I either graduated or died, whichever came first. At age 49, I finished my Bachelor of Science degree. At age 52, I completed a Master of Business Administration. At age 61, I earned a Doctor of Philosophy. Never let arrogant elitists define who you are or what you can be. Story 5. My great-grandmother ran a brothel at the turn of the 20th century. She was Algonquin, and people were pretty racist back then, so she had a hard time getting business. Since it was a coastal town in Maine, she bought a couple of leaky old rowboats, loaded them with sex workers and alcohol, and rowed them out to the ships at night. When ships came into port, most of the crew got shore leave and went to the bars and brothels in town, but they always had to leave a few sailors on the ship to keep an eye on it. My great-grandmother figured those men had money too and probably felt left out. She basically set up water-based lot lizards, or Uber hoes. My grandfather and his sisters grew up in the brothel, and no one would talk to them or socialize with them. My grandfather met my grandmother while picking green beans for a local farmer. They fell in love. When they wanted to get married, they had to leave the state to get away from her family, who were utterly disgusted that she would marry the son of a sex worker. So they ran off to Detroit because General Motors was hiring, and that's how my family came to Michigan. Story 6. I never graduated from high school, but I have a bachelor's degree. I was homeschooled and my mother never completed the legal steps to get a real diploma, so she made one in Photoshop, which was used to enroll me in a small community college that did not verify it. From there, I earned an associate's degree and then transferred to a university, where I earned my bachelor's degree. Story 7. I am allergic to lettuce. I carry an epinephrine auto-injector. Story 8. I was once sponsored by the Crunk Energy Drink Company for sailing. I imagine I was the only sailor on their list. I emailed them to say that I sailed and to ask if they wanted me to put stickers on my boat. They sent a few cases of the drink, t-shirts, hats, and everything else. My car was known as the Crunk Mobile. Story 9. In Minnesota in the 1970s, I was 16 and taking my driver's test. I was very nervous. A highway patrol officer was the road tester back then, which was even more nerve-wracking. I thought I was doing pretty well because I had practiced a lot with my parents. Then, toward the end of the driving test, I was at a T-intersection across from a hospital. I hesitated to turn onto the road because traffic was busy. I could tell the officer was getting a little impatient, but he was kindly telling me to be a bit more aggressive. Suddenly, at the hospital across from us, someone pushed a screen out of a third-floor window in the psychiatric ward. A woman jumped onto a garage roof below, then to the ground, and ran across the road right by us. The officer had me turn around. I was in my mother's car, and he told me to chase the woman into the neighborhood. When I would pull up to a stop sign during the chase, he would shout, "Go, go, go, just go through it." After a while, when she started to get away, he gave up on me being the chase driver and told me to head back to the Department of Motor Vehicles office. I was shaking and ready to accept that I would not get a license anytime soon, which felt devastating for a 16-year-old. He grabbed my score sheet, said, "You passed," and handed it to me. I had scored an 88. He ran to his highway patrol car and tore off to continue the chase. I went into the office a complete mess. My mom was already really nervous because we had been gone so long, and when she saw me looking like a ghost, she asked, "What happened?" I told her I had passed and then told her the story on the way home. She wasn't amused and was pretty angry with the highway patrol officer. When I tell the story, I say, "No lie, just ask my mom." Story 10. My great-grandfather worked in the textile business and began importing rayon from Japan in the late 1960s and 1970s. This was the early days of synthetic fabrics, and traveling to Japan was uncommon. On a business trip, he met Japanese businessmen who were selling newly designed transistor radios. His contacts wanted to set up an exclusive import agreement for their electronics in North America, but he declined because how many of those radios could you possibly sell? It turned out to be a short-sighted decision. The company was Sony, and he declined an exclusive import contract. On the other side of my family, my Canadian relatives walked away from 100 acres of land in Alberta during the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression, deciding it was not worth paying taxes. That land later lay in the heart of Alberta's oil deposits. Also on my mother's side, they had a citrus orchard near Los Angeles that they sold cheaply to land developers. The farm was at Hollywood and Vine. My family on both sides has been bad at spotting long-term investments. Story 11. I took my mother on a surprise trip to New York City. She married my father there in 1968. I arranged the surprise by telling her we were going to Australia. We live in New Zealand, so a trip to Australia is not a big deal. It is the sort of thing you could do for a weekend. She packed a bag and brought her passport. At the airport, we told her the surprise. We were going to New York City. She cried with delight. When we arrived, on our first morning, I asked her what she wanted to do. She said that when she was last there in 1968, the Twin Towers were not complete, and she would like to go to the top of them. I said that her wish was my command, and we went to the World Trade Center. That was the afternoon of September 10, 2001. There was a particular poignancy when we looked out the window at around 8 a.m. the next morning. Story 12. I was at a store when Tony Hawk was signing autographs. I was only 10 at the time and a huge fan. One of his early video games had just come out. The store had a couple of televisions on the wall and some video games to play. Being a kid, I waited for one controller to open up and someone to leave. A kid ended up leaving and I grabbed the controller and started playing. A few minutes later, the store wanted photos of Tony playing his own video game. He came over, grabbed the second controller and began to play multiplayer with me. We probably played for 10 minutes. The bonus was that it was also my 10th birthday, so I played Tony Hawk Pro Skater with Tony Hawk. I did not expect this story to get much attention. I do not have photos of myself playing the game with him, but I believe my parents have a couple of photos of me with him and getting his autograph. I still have the signed board on my wall. Story 13. I saw the former Prime Minister of Poland in his underwear. Story 14. Once in college, I applied for a job at the library help desk. I figured I would help people find books. I didn't give it much more thought than that. During the interview, I aced all the customer service questions. Then they asked whether I knew how to defragment a hard drive. Alarm bells went off in my head, but I kept calm and said, "No, you can teach me." I worked in information technology for 3 years by accident. They were too nice to fire me. Story 15. I found out my father was not my biological father in 10th grade biology class. We were learning about blood types and traits. I raised my hand thinking I was a smartass and said that the chart was not accurate because my dad is AB negative and I am O positive. My teacher replied that my mom had some explaining to do. We all chuckled. Turned out he was not my father. Story 16. I am 30, and my husband has been my best friend since I was 7. He was the new kid at school, and I walked up to him and said, "We are going to be best friends." He replied, "No, we are not. Leave me alone." I bugged him every day for 2 weeks before he finally said, "If I am going to be your friend, will you be quiet about it? We were married 20 years later. I proved him wrong. Story 17. When I was a child, a horse knocked me into the air. I was not riding him. He grabbed the skin on my back with his teeth and flung me. Story 18. My father kidnapped me and took me to Singapore for very malicious purposes, which I am sure you can imagine. I was 15 and he had fake documents and suitcases filled with random clothes. When we arrived, we checked into a sketchy hotel. About 15 minutes later, he went to the bar. A short time after that, a man walked in. I was confused. He began muttering that I was too pale and too old, and then he left. I called my father, but he did not answer, so I climbed out through the window and went to the police. They put me on a plane home that same hour. I do not usually tell people because it sounds crazy and made up, which is why I am sharing it here. Story 19. I was a rocket scientist. I worked on the 114 air-to-ground missile. The work involved verifying rocket bodies. The backbone of science is repeating experiments. My job was to make sure we were going to get the same result every time. People call me a liar because their idea of a rocket scientist is Wernher von Braun. Story 20. I once won a $500 raffle during a routine visit to my local tea shop. It was the building's annual Black Friday event, and there were 5 baskets with varying amounts of goods, services, and coupons. I needed tea, so my only stop was the tea shop. It cost me $20 to fill my tins, but they said raffle tickets were given out after a $25 purchase. I decided to buy a hot tea for myself and the woman in line behind me. I entered with that one ticket. A few days later, I received a call saying I had won the top prize basket. When I went to claim it, they asked about my purchases. I told them, and they said the drawings had over 1,000 tickets and many people had more than a dozen entries. The raffle prize included $25 to the tea shop. Story 21. When I was a child, I woke up to find my cat giving birth to her kittens on my pillow, only an inch from my face. I took it as a compliment. Story 22. One of my ancestors was dumb and bought one of Napoleon's doorknobs. Turns out it is fake. Doorknobs were invented after Napoleon died. Story 23. I survived a plane crash in the desert, was trapped there for 2 days, and was rescued by 2 men who were trying to bet whether they could cook an egg in the sand. Story 24. I spent a wonderful day in London with Christian Slater and his mother. She is adorable. Story 25. I have been stabbed 8 times. This is a new account, and I am prepared to identify myself. I did not get the chance to tell my story in court because they pleaded guilty before I was called. I had been drinking and stepped outside the pub for fresh air. I walked past 3 men and one of them asked me for a cigarette. I told him I did not smoke and he immediately became aggressive. I argued with him for a while, and his friends started shouting and threatening me. At this point, he disappeared behind me. One of the others showed me a knife, so I turned and walked away. I knew they were following me as I walked back toward the pub. There was a bus stop on my left and a building on my right. I looked up and saw the first man walking toward me. It was fight or flight, and I had nowhere to flee, so I decided that attacking was the best form of defense. I landed one punch before the 3 of them jumped me. They had been robbing and assaulting people all over town for about 2 weeks beforehand. Story 26. At about 50 and with little to no video game experience, my mother completed Super Mario 64 in half the time it took me. Story 27. My great-great-grandfather was a Pinkerton detective, performed in vaudeville, and had 5 wives in 2 different states who did not know about each other. He slightly changed his last name each time and was not discovered until the Ancestry website revealed him. Story 28. When I was a small child, a pelican engulfed my head with its massive beak. Pelicans are cunts. Story 29. I bought a guitar amplifier from Brad Whitford of Aerosmith when I was 17. He and Steven Tyler served cheeseburgers to me and my friends. Brad's son was a punk and I knew him from the scene. I was in a band that had some small local success. This was 1997 and 1998 in Boston. I needed a new amplifier for our first United States tour but had very little money. I was drinking with his son and, on a whim, I asked if his father had any amplifiers lying around that he did not need. We laughed and kept partying. The next day, I got a call at home. It was Mr. Whitford himself. He was very nice but to the point. My son says you have a band and need a good rig for your Les Paul. I have something in mind for you. I just have to have my guy get it from the warehouse. Come by my house in Norwell this weekend and check it out. That was the gist of the call. The whole band came with me and our roadie. We went to his house and it was exactly as you would expect. These guys were like gods in Boston. I was not the biggest fan but knew him from Wayne's World. He took me to one of his garages where there was a full stack. The brand was Bedrock, an old company from New Hampshire that made quality amplifiers in the 1980s. This one was custom made for Brad and used Marshall components. For tubes, all the knobs go to 11, not kidding. It still had Property of Aerosmith stickers on it. He plugged it in, ripped a solo on his Les Paul, and then handed it to me to play a couple power chords. He asked $300 for the whole thing. I paid him and he told his son to give us a tour of the house. Things got crazy. Tons of gold records, platinum records, pictures of him with people like John Lennon, Robert De Niro, and Joey Ramone. Then we saw his studio and the largest collection of Marshall amplifiers I have seen, roughly 200 speaker cabinets. A wall of guitars. Guitars so pretty and amplifiers so cool that it made sense for him to find the one he sold me dispensable. After the house tour, he told us to meet him at the little bar and grill they owned in town. We got there early and he arrived 30 minutes later with Steven Tyler in tow. You guys the punk group? He was very nice. They went in the back and came out with burgers for all of us on the house. Then they left without fanfare. I still have the amplifier. I used it on the road for almost 10 years in 5 bands. Now it is a conversation piece, but it still works and I crank it up every now and then. Edit 2. Pictures were shared. Story 30. I can detect certain illnesses and chronic symptoms by smell. My sense of smell is usually average, but I can sometimes smell when a person is sick before they show symptoms. I have been able to identify or predict 2 seizures, a drop in blood sugar in a person with diabetes, and multiple chronic migraines before they occurred. Story 31. I lost my heel in a lawn mower accident. Here is the story. I was 4 years old at the time and I will not say who did it. He was mowing with a riding mower. The hitch on the back where you can hook a small trailer was a place I loved to stand and ride. This time I saw a frog in the grass. Being 4 years old, I jumped off the mower onto the grass and put my hands over the frog to catch it. He did not realize I had jumped off and backed up. Story 32. I had my tongue surgically enhanced for more reach and flexibility when I was 8. I am super jazzed by how many of us are out there. Story 33. I won 2 television game shows. The $10,000 Pyramid, where I won $10,300 in 1975, and Sale of the Century, where I appeared for 9 days and won $34,000 in cash and prizes in 1985. Story 34. I once drove a locomotive backward through the Canadian Rockies. Story 35. Despite having a genetic tremor, I have been playing guitar passionately for 8 years. Story 36. I was arrested and spent 3 days in a holding cell for a crime I didn't commit, about a year after the matter had been resolved. I was involved in the story from start to finish. Story 37. I was born 12 weeks early. I was nearly born even earlier because my mother had a weak uterus due to endometriosis, so they had to delay my birth and repair her uterus. The doctors told my parents to expect me to be unable to breathe, walk, or perform other basic functions on my own. The doctor performing the cesarean section was surprised by how loudly I was screaming and how much I was flailing. I do have a few health problems, but it could have been much worse. I had hydrocephalus. It was initially treated poorly. The doctor thought I was fine and my parents were overreacting when I was having seizures and turning colors. It was treated, and I now have approximately 6 feet of tubing in a shunt, as well as seizures I will never outgrow. They are controlled with medication. Aside from asthma and other minor issues, I live a normal life. I graduated from high school a few years ago and hope to be married soon. Thank you everyone for your stories. To be honest, I am a bit overwhelmed. I did not expect my comment to receive so much attention. I will do my best to respond, and I apologize in advance if I do not. I am reading every comment, and they all mean so much. Story 38. When my mother was in graduate school, she took several laboratory classes where she worked with cadavers. Because my father worked nights, she often had to bring me to class, and she would usually place me on the table beside a cadaver while she continued her work. Story 39. I ran out of gas outside of La Paz, Bolivia. Luckily, it was downhill for about 6 kilometers into the city. I coasted the whole way on my motorcycle, past buses, and drifted into a gas station. Never missed a beat. Story 40. I once successfully ran an unfunded shelter for approximately 100 homeless veterans while I was a homeless civilian. Story 41. I can't look left. Seriously, I'm not able to look equally well in both directions. It's like the Zoolander of birth defects. It's called Duane syndrome. My left eye cannot turn to the left, so when I try I see double. Growing up, my parents taught me it was a party trick rather than a disability, so I would show it off to friends. In retrospect, that was pretty sweet. My mother noticed something was off when I was a baby, while making the airplane motion with a spoon of baby food toward my left. My left eye did not follow, which was funny. Now that I am in my 30s, I can see in photos a bag under my right eye but not under my left, presumably because I use my right eye far more. I am excited to see there are so many other people with Duane syndrome. I had never met anyone else who had it, so it is really nice to hear from people who know what it is like. Driving has not impacted me much because my mother taught me to use my mirrors first and to turn my head before I even started the car. She walked around the car and we identified my limitations. I also have a blind spot detector on my car now, which is very helpful. I try not to depend on it entirely. Here is a photo. Story 42. I am one of very few people outside World War I to have survived mustard gas. It was so rare that doctors in 1995 with no internet had no idea how to treat me. Story 43. I have never been sick or shown symptoms of illness. I have not had colds, fevers, viruses, or the flu. I do not know what it is like to be ill, and I hope I never experience it. It would be ironic if the first time I became ill was now. Note: I am 30 years old. Story 44. My ancestry can be traced to a court jester who served King Jacob IV of Sweden. Story 45. I have phytophotodermatitis, which is a big fancy phrase meaning I cannot get acidic fruit juices such as lemons, limes, apples, and oranges on my skin and then go out in the sun. Turns my skin brown like a rash. It does not hurt or itch. It just causes discoloration. This has happened 3 or 4 times in my life. Story 46. I have been in 3 fatal train accidents and never had a scratch. Story 47. I worked during the summer at a hotel and summer camp for people from Eastern Europe. One of my colleagues, the cook, found a wounded crow, healed it, and trained it. The bird sat on her shoulder while she cooked, came to her on command, and even shared cigarettes with her. Story 48. I once fell over a chair during a massive bar fight and, in the process, kicked a German Marine out of a second-story window in the middle of downtown Queensland. Story 49. I am blind. Many online commenters think I am lying. If I want to lie, I would rather tell everyone that I am a wealthy traveler. Story 50. My grandfather received an award from Benito Mussolini in 1935. He weighed 6.3 kilograms, or 13 pounds 14.2 ounces, at birth and was given the title Italy's biggest baby. I did not expect this to get so much attention. Thanks for the silver user XX sandwich XX. My great-grandmother worked as a cleaning lady one day before he was born. He was born on December 24th, and she worked until December 23rd of that year. If you think my grandfather was large, a baby was recently born in India weighing 6.7 kilograms, or 14 pounds 12.4 ounces. The world record was held by another Italian baby, born in 1955, who weighed 10.2 kilograms, or 22 pounds 8 ounces. Story 51. I was run over by a car. The driver did not see me and then backed over me. Edit 1. Thank you for all the kind words. I am shocked by how many people said this had happened to them or to someone they knew. The world is a strange place. For those asking, my legs are fine now. I actually enjoy running. It is one of my favorite activities. No, I am not from China and have never lived there. I am American. I do not understand why people are asking this. Edit 2. A couple of Reddit users pointed out that it is because killing someone in China is apparently less expensive, which is a horrifying thought. Thank you for the explanations. Edit 3. How is my mental health? Was I traumatized? It was extremely terrifying at the time, and I was definitely afraid of cars afterward. If you are asking whether I still feel trauma today, I would say not very much, if at all. Thank you for asking. Story 52. Nobody knows why I'm half blind, not even the World Health Organization. I went blind in my left eye when I was 7. My optic nerve atrophied. There is no explanation. I had extensive testing and my body was completely normal at the time. Several specialists came to hospitals near me to examine me, but the answer was that it just happened, we guess. There is more to my story, which sometimes feels like an awful sitcom, but the eye problem is the easiest to explain. About the World Health Organization, at one point the person responsible for my care took my file to a World Health Organization conference and returned with no answers. Story 53. I have had a headache since August 2015, and I will probably have it for the rest of my life. It is present on only one side of my head, so I have that going for me, which is nice. Story 54. I cannot taste any salt whatsoever. Update. For people asking, it is a brain-related issue. Food tastes bland, salted chips taste plain, and I have not had any British food. Second update. I can still taste other spices and herbs. I do not know what semen tastes like. Sorry to single you out, but that is unusual. Salt water just tastes bad. Monosodium glutamate and other sodium-based foods make me gag. Playing on Xbox, Overwatch, and other games does not help, but I can smell the salt. Story 55. I ate a piece of the Berlin Wall. I was suspended from school and grounded for a month. Story 56. My ex and I were having a huge argument in a hotel parking lot. My friend and my ex's father were there as witnesses. 2 large buses pulled up. Justin Bieber exited one of them with a security guard and walked right past us. I was crying while my ex was yelling at me. Justin Bieber said, "Hey, stop that." My ex yelled back at him, "White people should not have dreadlocks." Justin Bieber then boarded the other bus with his security guard. My friend laughed and asked, "Was that Justin Bieber?" It turned out members of his entourage were staying at the hotel. He was in town that night for a concert. Summary. Justin Bieber told my ex to stop yelling at me, and then my ex yelled at him. Story 57. My grandmother researched our family genealogy and proved we are related to Edgar Allan Poe. Story 58. Someone was decapitated on my first day at a minimum wage job. Story 59. I was almost named Storm because I was born at 3 a.m. during a massive tornado that touched down a few minutes after my birth. I was also essentially dead. Doctors thought they were going to lose both my mother and me, but somehow I survived. Story 60. I beat anorexia. I am a man and I do not have photos of myself from that time because of shame, so I have no proof. I went from 70 pounds to about 130 pounds. Story 61. I was shooting targets in my village when a bullet ricocheted and struck me in the torso. I was young and afraid my parents would kill me if they found out, so I used a knife and tweezers to remove the fragment, stapled the wound closed, and covered it. They did not find out until years later when I told them. Story 62. I cannot drink red Gatorade. The red dye makes me nauseous and causes me to panic. I used to drink it without problems, but one year I started feeling sick all the time, so I stopped. Stopping helped, and I do not drink it now. I tried it again recently and still could not tolerate it. Edit. Whoa, I have 88 messages. Thank you. Story 63. My grandfather went absent without leave from the French Foreign Legion and was banned from ever returning to France because he left to marry my grandmother. Oh my goodness, this blew up. Reddit YouTubers, please do not feature this comment. Story 64. My mom drove me to the airport at 5 a.m. for a booty call when I was 30. Story 65. I was taught Kung Fu by a homeless Chinese monk. I studied with him for years and eventually ran my own school. Story 66. I completed Grand Theft Auto San Andreas in 3 days. I did not sleep, eat, or defecate. Story 67. I am related to William Henry Harrison, the president who died of hypothermia because he would not wear a jacket. My great-grandfather and his son also died of hypothermia, though under different circumstances. I have nearly died from taking too many vitamins, running into a ceiling fan, and jumping off a cliff. My father almost set a gas station on fire. We are a very dumb bloodline, starting with William Henry Harrison. Story 68. I rappelled off the Canadian National Tower in Toronto, Canada to paint the top white. I did not expect that much of a reaction. That was a cool little detail. We were anchored at the very top and got in and out through hatches there. When you went down a bit and had enough rope above you, you could kick out and look straight out into the open air above the city. If you kicked out at an angle, you might swing back to avoid the tower and end up circling it, winding your rope around the structure because it is relatively thin at the top. Then you would unwind and circle back the other way. It was like flying 1,800 feet above the city. I missed that job. Story 69. Rumor has it that I have an almost supernatural sense of smell when it comes to food. I would spontaneously say, I smell something, or who's eating that? And be correct, even if the scent was barely in the air and often a room away. But it's not supernatural. I just have an oversensitive olfactory system, almost like a canine sense of smell. That also means strong odors like smoke, paint fumes, perfume, or talcum powder easily overpower me to the point of gagging. It's amazing how many people are like me. I always thought there was something wrong with my sense of smell being so unnaturally strong, but it turns out it's more common than I thought. For those wondering, no, it is not debilitating. Pleasant smells don't hurt my nose, but strong chemical-based odors or very foul smells hit hard. Story 70. I have ridden a bicycle for 100,000 miles, approximately 161,000 kilometers. Story 71. I have a single chest hair in the center of my chest. I have had it for 15 years. I am 30. Sometimes it falls out, but it grows back within a few days. Story 72. When I was a young adult, I was jumped by a group of men while attending a weekend party at a lake. I was roughed up badly, but with a beer bottle I found while being stomped, I managed to turn the tables and fight back. The next day, I saw my attackers in the light, and a couple of them looked injured. I later found out that one of them was a 30-year-old man who had to have his wedding pictures taken with stitches and bruises on his face. Story 73. Having 2 failed outpatient surgeries in 15 years to fix a recurring pilonidal cyst, I refuse to go back and now have 2 buttholes I can fart out of. That is probably enough. Reddit. Story 74. There is a scientist who died on the same day I was born, and her research subject was very close to mine. Not just the field, but even down to some articles she wrote and some of her side interests. Some details of her personal life also echo mine. I only found out after I graduated, and now I oddly feel like reincarnation might be a thing. Edited to add, I do not actually believe in reincarnation. That was a joke. Seriously. Story 75. There was a typo on my birth certificate. Legally, my middle name is spelled Kimberly. Story 76. My husband and I fell in love at first sight. We moved in together after 2 days and married 5 months later. We are still married. We will have been married 40 years in May. Story 77. I went on a guided tour of the World Trade Center on August 11, 2001. I was on the rooftop. Story 78. The Volkswagen Beetle on the cover of Abbey Road by the Beatles belonged to my grandfather. We are not 100% sure it was his, but he was in London during the photo shoot, owned that exact car in that exact color, and it had a few other telltale markings. He also says he parked there that day. Story 79. I have shot an actual rocket-propelled grenade launcher Model 7. If I had been in the army, that might be less surprising, but I am not. There was a shooting range in Cambodia that lets you fire one for a very steep price. It was a once-in-a-lifetime experience, though I might do it again if I ever go back. Story 80. I am severely allergic to methamphetamine. One of the main ingredients of methamphetamine is pseudoephedrine, which causes a severe allergic reaction in me. Story 81. I fell from a roof about 12 feet onto a concrete floor and did not have a single scratch. Story 82. I cannot burp. If I drink something with too much carbonation, I feel like vomiting and have to wait for the small bubbles to escape one at a time. Story 83. I never knew whether it hit me or struck nearby, but a bolt of lightning sent me flying a couple of meters into a wall when I was a child. I walked it off completely unscathed, but I developed a newfound respect for thunderstorms. Story 84. I was the best man for both brides at a lesbian wedding because I had dated both of them, remained close friends, and introduced them to each other after our breakups. Story 85. I experience orgasm synesthesia, but only with penetrative orgasms. Whenever I orgasm, I see purple. Sometimes it appears as a field of purple flowers or a mass of grapevines, but it is always a lovely purple image. Once it was Barney the dinosaur, laughing out loud. Sometimes it is a uniform lavender color, as if my brain blanks on the color lavender. Story 86. My birthday is January 2nd, 2003, and I was born at 4:56 in the morning. If that is not strange enough, I weighed 7 pounds 8 ounces at birth. So yes, all my documents look fake. Story 87. I am related to a National Football League player and you would never know it. He is 6 feet 8 inches tall, weighs 265 pounds, and is black. I am 6 feet tall, weigh 195 pounds, and am white. We are second cousins through his mother, a 5 feet 2 inches Irish woman. We grew up very close and still stay in touch. I get to see him a couple of times a year and we pick up as if nothing has changed. Of all the cousins, I think he spoils me because I have never once asked him for anything and always turned down gifts. It is enough to see what he has become for himself, and it is gift enough that we are still this close. It angers me when family shamelessly asks him for money. It is his money and he earned it. I have had enough direct messages asking, so I will answer here. We only see each other in person a couple of times a year, but we text every day and have video or voice calls 3 to 4 times a week. We are really close and I am very proud of him. After his first year we talked and I told him he would end up like the athletes we laughed at growing up if he did not hire a real financial manager and start investing wisely, because he could not predict everything. And his career could be cut short by injury at any time. I can happily say he is very smart and has cut toxic people from his life who prioritized his money over him. When he signed his new contract, he had several funds set up to plan for his eventual retirement, so he is set for life. He tried to buy me a car or pay my student loans as a thank you for the advice. I turned it down and reminded him what we had just talked about. I love him like my own brother. Story 88. I have had chronic constipation all my life. I am having bowel movements more frequently than before, currently about 1.5 to 2 per week. The longest I ever went without was roughly 1 month, which resulted in passing a stool the size and consistency of a brick. Story 89. I am a triplet, and all 3 of us graduated from college by the age of 19. Story 90. My maternal ancestors were long thought to be French, arriving with William the Conqueror. However, they were later identified as Norsemen who came through England into France to fight Charles the Fat. They later returned and fought Charles the Stupid. William granted them land for their loyalty. I find it amusing that my family made their name by fighting the fat and the stupid. Story 91. I do not have joint sockets where my jaw connects to my skull. Story 92. I was shot in the head and did not go to the emergency room for 2 weeks. Story 93. My old apartment building had 6 units. We were all low income, living paycheck to paycheck. Our landlord was the meanest woman I have ever met. She was racist, homophobic, and cruel. Over the years, she became a nightmare. One day, she gathered all the tenants in the parking lot and handed us eviction notices. We learned that we would all be homeless in 30 days. An 80-year-old woman named Thelma lived across the hall. She had no living family and would become homeless. My father and sister both have multiple sclerosis. I was basically the only one who could move our belongings after work in 30 days. We planned to live with my uncle until we found a place. A single mother below us was raising her son alone. The landlord did not care. She raised the rent by $300 and planned to renovate the entire building. She even showed us the appliances she planned to install and called us the saddest tenants she had ever dealt with. My father asked her to reconsider the eviction because we were struggling. She laughed in his face, said she was going to Las Vegas for the weekend, and would not accept pity phone calls. On October 3, 2017, I came home from work. My father was watching the television with a look of shock. He read the victim list from the Las Vegas shooting. Our landlord was one of the 58 people who were gunned down. We were in total shock. 3 days after evicting 6 lower-income families, she was killed at a country music concert. She was a nasty, cruel person, but she did not deserve to die. She was somebody's mother, daughter, and wife. My life changed from that moment on. I was afraid that if I treated someone poorly, karma would catch up to me. I became depressed and riddled with anxiety. Story 94. I once fished a bird out of the sky. I cast my line and the hook caught a passing bird. It fell into the lake and was nearly eaten by alligators. Story 95. I cannot see images in my mind's eye when I imagine something. This condition is called aphantasia and is still being researched. If you close your eyes and imagine an apple, I do not see the apple. I only see black. I know what an apple looks like from memory and can describe it, but I cannot see it in my mind. Almost all of my imagination consists of conversations, words, and music. If someone asks me to recall a concert memory, I do not see the stage or its setup. I instantly recall the music. Story 96. First comment ever. I helped prevent a terrorist attack on a prominent United States bridge. I am a social worker. Edit. See the details under the comment below. Story 97. When I was 11 years old, my chihuahua named Taco was stolen by an eagle while I was distracted watching 2 lizards mating. In shock, I watched the dog fly off into the sunset in the grasp of the eagle's talons. Taco, no. Story 98. I have published 4 peer-reviewed papers on hamster testicles. Edit. Holy shit. I never thought I would write this, but rest in peace to my inbox. I am currently working on a critical coronavirus disease 2019 related project that does not involve testicles and therefore would be much less exciting for posting on Reddit. Story 99. Not about me. My mother moved to a third world country when she was little. Her father tried to auction her off to potential husbands, but she escaped with the local drug dealer. She married him and had my sister. My sister almost died of pneumonia. She wanted to leave him. He tried to shoot her, but she fought him and escaped with her daughter. She met a millionaire and had my brother. She had 3 miscarriages. It turned out his ex-girlfriend had cursed my mother and had buried a voodoo doll of her in the garden. They burned the doll and my mother became pregnant. The millionaire did not want the child and hired men to kill my mother. She escaped to her home country with the children while heavily pregnant. She gave birth to my brother, worked for a while, and met my father through an advertisement. It turned out he had been in prison many times and wanted a companion. They married, had me and another brother, and divorced because my father became an alcoholic. They remarried and divorced again this year. Most of my friends do not believe a word when I tell them about my family until my mother tells them. I just told my mother I posted her story and translated the comments for her. She was very happy people took the time to read her stories. She also said, "Daughter, I know you can write. I have many more, the worst stories. I never told you, but if you want to write them down, I will." Now she is telling me about the shootings and the corpses she witnessed as a child. Oh Lord. Story 100. My stomach is in 2 parts. I have a hiatal hernia, so part of my stomach is pushed through the diaphragm and sits above it, while the other part remains below. I joke it is a pre-party stomach leading to the main event. Story 101. I went to give blood and learned I have a blood disorder, so my state would not accept it. The nurse said the neighboring state not only would accept it, they give it to pregnant women. It is ridiculous that it is not accepted in my state but is given to pregnant women next door. So I drive 45 minutes every 112 days to donate. I am up to 3 gallons so far. Story 102. I dreamed about the 2017 Las Vegas shooting a week before it happened. Story 103. I was pistol whipped and then shot in the face during a mugging, which left large portions of my upper lip missing. The plastic surgeon reconstructed my upper lip using tissue from the labia of a recently deceased organ donor. Story 104. This is probably my entire medical history. If you hear it all, it may sound hard to believe. Some highlights. I had a 32-pound ovarian cyst when I was 12 and another 5-pound ovarian cyst when I was 14. I have permanent double vision and had no idea that most people do not see double in their peripheral vision until last year. I am 28. I suffered from chronic pain and was constantly in the emergency room for very severe abdominal pain to the point that everyone there thought I was a drug addict. After about 10 specialist visits, it turned out that I have a severe but atypical intolerance to dairy. I have a psychoneurological issue that causes me to lose the ability to walk when I become extremely stressed, with no identifiable underlying cause. I have never fabricated symptoms, but I rarely see doctors anymore because they generally stop believing me or think I am faking. Hearing that they have no idea every time is tiring. Additional details. I recently developed resistance to anesthesia. I woke up during a colonoscopy and during an upper endoscopy. I have also been unable to have one of my teeth fixed because the local anesthetic did not work. I had to have an emergency root canal on a tooth that already had a previous root canal because the first procedure did not address everything. I narrowly avoided oral surgery. This occurred before the anesthesia resistance began. Story 105. My nose is crooked because my mother accidentally hit me with the kitchen sink. When I was 11, I was leaning into the sink to clean a bowl. My mother swiveled the faucet, thinking the sink would swing right in front of me, but I was in the perfect position for it to hit me directly across the nose. My nose broke cleanly but healed crooked. It isn't at a crazy angle and I can breathe and use it mostly normally, but after people look at my face long enough they always notice something is not quite right. It was a complete accident, and she is a fantastic mother, but she made me promise never to tell anyone how it happened. Sorry, Mom. Story 106. My dad was on the drug task force and he did a stakeout from our living room window for the house across the street. His coworkers and he were in our living room with all the equipment they needed. When they sent in the undercover person, the tape recorded. The person saying, "We have to be careful. Fucking my dad across the street is a cop." Everyone burst out laughing and almost disrupted the investigation. I was about 8 at the time and thought I was a total badass because I got to help my dad with an investigation. Story 107. By the age of 17, I had been involved in 2 bicycle crashes, 2 bus crashes, 1 drive-by shooting on a bus, and 1 major car crash. I was not responsible for any of them and did not have to pay for damages. Story 108. I took a public speaking class in college and had to give a speech on any topic of my choosing with a PowerPoint. The night before I had absolutely nothing, not even an idea what to speak about. It's now 5 a.m. the day of the presentation and I still had nothing. I was desperately trying to think of something to make up when it hit me. I would make up a speech in PowerPoint in about 3 hours about how to get away with bullshitting a speech. For example, my second point was simply to restate everything using different phrasing, a classic technique. And my third point was the same material phrased differently to illustrate the point. It was funny to see the class slowly realize what was happening during that part because many were surprisingly slow on the uptake. I also included a slide from a previous PowerPoint about surviving bear attacks in Florida on purpose to make it even shoddier. After the presentation, I walked up to the teacher who had begun grading us and he gave me an A. I turned to the class and said I could not believe that worked. Thankfully, my best friend was in that class, so I had a witness. I probably would not have been comfortable doing it otherwise. Story 109. There was a successful manga series in Japan in which I was the main character, including my real name, appearance, clothes, and other details. I did not know it at the time, but a new friend of mine was a very famous manga artist, and we had several adventures together. I mostly showed off my city and country while they were visiting. About a year after the author returned to Japan, I received a parcel in the mail. Inside was the signed first chapter of the manga. The series became a hit and several more chapters were produced. Edit. I prefer not to share the name of the manga series. It was very popular and the main character is literally me. My real name, appearance, where I lived, and so on are all shown, so I do not want to give up my anonymity. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.